Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Budget Review Committee being held on Tuesday, May 5th, 2026 at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. The meeting's been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91-A:22. Meeting's being presided by me, Alderman Dowd. Will you please take the roll?
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien. Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Alicia Gregg.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow is here. Alderman Paula Johnson.
Present.
Alderman Tim Senate, Vice Chair. Alderman Richard A. Dowd, Chairman. Also in attendance, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have quorum. Also in attendance is Mario Andre, National School District Superintendent, Crystal DeGray, Chief Operating Officer, I should say. We also have Alderman John Sullivan and Alderman Patricia Klee, and we also have Director Tim Cummings in the back.
Alderman Gregg,
What?
did you say?
You already called
She's
me
part of
out.
the, she's part of the committee,
Sorry.
so yeah, I got her.
And we have the president of the school board here, Jen Bishop, and another member of the school board,
Reagan.
We have Rob.
Reagan.
We have Rob
I was just
Johnson.
waiting for the. all the
And Rob Johnson from the Board of Ed as well.
Oh, Rob Johnson. Oh, he's hiding behind, yeah, there we go. All right, so we have a quorum, communications,
There is none.
unfinished business,
None.
new business resolutions,
None.
new business ordinances,
None.
tabled in committee.
I'd like to make a motion to remove from the table R-26-028 relative to the R-26-028 relative to the adoption of the fiscal year 2027 proposed budget for the City of Nashua, General Enterprise Special Revenue and Grant Funds.
And we can take it without a roll call because there's nobody online yet. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. R-26-028 is taken off the table. It's the review of the budgets of the city. Tonight, our budget review is of the school department. Revenues are on page 213 and appropriations on 214. And we can bring the school department up, whoever wants to go up and sit.
Do they want the clicker? You guys want the clicker?
Or do you want us to do it from up here? Either way. When you click it, you have to point at the bottom of
Your
the
clock.
desk.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes.
But the keyboard always works.
Technology.
The wireless keyboard always works, so they can always give you that.
Just let us know if it doesn't work from your end. Oh, it does.
We can get right into it.
Yeah, I think we can go right into it.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here. Tonight, we'll go through our budget presentation for the 2027 school year. So, I'm Mario Andre, Superintendent of Schools.
Crystal DeGray, Chief Operating Officer.
Jen Bishop, Board of Education President.
Regan Lamphere, Chair of the Budget Committee.
So as we begin the presentation this evening, I think it's really important to think about the vision of our school. And so we just rewrote our strategic plan and rewrote our vision statement, and I think this really matters and hits home. So our vision is the Nashua School District is a community where curiosity drives education and every learner is valued. And I think it's really important when we talk about our budget tonight on multiple facets. One, the school district is about the community. It's beyond the bricks and mortars of our buildings. Curiosity. We're driving education forward, so what's in our budget that we're actually asking questions about? And I think healthy discourse is what we need to move forward. And also curiosity to ask questions of how are we improving? Are we having an open mind, a growth mindset, or are we fixed in ways that we're doing things. And every learner is valued. And we were very specific in using the word learner, because we're all learners. Everyone in the community is just not students. And when we talk about the next 5 years of the school district moving forward, everybody needs to come to the table with curiosity. And I think it's really important as we ask these difficult questions on, especially around our budget or changes in our school, that we give each other grace, that we're vulnerable, we're curious, we ask questions, and that we're not judgmental. And remember that we're all learners in the process. So a little background of Nashua School District by the numbers. So Nashua at a glance, and we'll see this later on. We're currently, for our total enrollment is 9,500 students. Our budget last year was $191 million. Our average class size is 19 students per classroom. We have just over 2,000 staff members. And we had a graduating class of just under 800 last year. And we have 49 languages in our schools.
All right, yep. So based off of student enrollment, as Dr. Andre mentioned, we have 9,501 students currently during the 25-26 school year. If we look at the total FTEs related to teachers that we currently have on staff, that is 958 teachers that are employed through the district. Next slide, please. So this slide is pretty interesting just from a storytelling standpoint. So you have the historical information on screen of the last 10 years. This is our overall student enrollment and student makeup. So as folks can see all the way over to the right-hand side for fiscal year 25-26, that 9,501 students is made up of 2235, which is our special education students. We have just over 2,000 students that are identified as ELL, and then our general education students is made up of just over 5,000. So the important message here is our student enrollment is absolutely changing year over year. Our student enrollment is also declining. And based off of those declines and based off of our student population being identified in different buckets, we are seeing a significant increase in overall cost. Next slide.
So the last couple of years, we talked about our ELL student growth versus our ELL teachers. And as you know, back in 2021, or actually 2020, we were under a DOJ settlement agreement with the Department of Justice regarding our ELL instruction. So you'll notice over the last couple of years, and part of the settlement agreement was because we were not properly staffed in our ELL department. So over the last few years, you can see the dramatic increase in our investment with ELL teachers to close the caseload or the gap between the amount of students that we have and the amount of ELL teachers so that we're providing better services. So you can see here in this slide that back in 2008, 2009, there was one teacher for every 45 ELL students. And currently in 25-26, the ratio is down to 35 ELL students to one ELL teacher. And in this year, we're proposing to add more ELL teachers to lower that ratio as well. And this is an overview of our elementary projected class sizes. If you recall, about 3 years ago, we right-sized the elementary school and we eliminated around 10 elementary teachers. And you can see with the reduction of elementary regular ed teachers a couple of years ago, we still monitor our class sizes. And you can see overall in this slide that our class sizes are still high teens, low 20s, and we watch these numbers throughout the summer to make sure that classes are not too large. We really concentrate on K-1-2. That's where the research is around smaller class sizes. So you might see classes in grades 4 and 5 hovering around the 23, 24. There's a little more wiggle room there, according to the research, as opposed to K-1-2. And this is our next year projected enrollment at our middle school levels. And you can see, again, class size. I'll walk you through one of the Penachuk. So in 6th grade, the 272 is the amount of students. There's 3 teams. That's the second number. So the 3 is the amount of teams in 6th grade. 4 is the amount of teachers on a team. And then you get to your average class size of 22.7. So you can see across the 3 schools that our class sizes are around, the 24, 25 range, some are around 21. So there's about 100 students. We aim for about 100 students on a team, and that's the quick math at the middle school. That's really fast. Any questions on how we kind of look at middle school numbers?
Yes, do you want to take questions now, or?
Yeah, I think it's, as we kind of go, I think it's conversational.
Thank you. I apologize.
Going to do budget committee first.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't know if we were doing questions.
Alderwoman Kelly?
You were talking about class size and that K-12, K-2 is where you really look at that size. What is expected and what is sort of the best practice for those grades in terms of how many?
So the research there's no exact number to say 10 is the perfect number or 25. But we know it's the high teens to low 20s is usually, and we try to aim for that 20 mark. But anything where over 25 is a large class. Contractually, these are under our contractual numbers, both at the elementary and secondary level. So we don't want to rub up against the contract numbers as well. So.
All set?
Can I ask one more question, please?
Go ahead, follow up.
So when you were talking about the changing enrollment, you may not know the answer to this. It's a little bit of an anecdotal question, but is it that we are getting fewer students who are general ed, or is it that general ed students are finally getting diagnosed and then put into other buckets?
Well, I think we're seeing more and more students with more intensive needs coming in, and I think they're being properly identified. But overall, the reduction in regular ed students, I think, is more related to the housing market and declining birth rate. And so I think it's just we're seeing more students who need IEPs or ELL services, but I think the overall trend where we're not at 13,000 students anymore is housing and birth related.
Thank you.
All set? Alderwoman Clee?
Thank you. I have 2 quick questions. The slide that was after this one here, the one that talked about the middle school, can you tell me what the 4 numbers? I was able to figure it out, but I assume the middle 2 numbers are teachers? Or?
So the first number will pick on Penachuk again.
That's
in 6th grade.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the 272.
Yeah, I figured that's the enrollment.
That's the students.
Yeah.
The 3 is the number of teams.
Teams, okay, yeah.
So there's 3
I
teams.
want to explain what teams.
A team is a group of 4 teachers.
Right.
So that's your math, ELA, social studies, and science teacher. That constitutes 1 team.
Okay.
And then 4 is the number of teachers.
Okay.
And then the 22.7 is the average class size.
Okay, yeah, no, I figured that one. It was the 2 middle numbers I was a little confused with. I appreciate that. And may I ask a question from your beginning? Okay, here it is. One thing that I did, and maybe you're going to touch on it, and if that's the case, just tell me to wait. How many IEPs do you have, and how many of them are actually in the physically in the school, and how many of them do you provide for outside?
So
So these numbers do not include out-of-district tuition kids.
Okay.
So the special education students that you see in this graph, it's kind of the orangey,
Right.
yellow color.
Yeah, I figured.
So we have 2,235 students that are identified as special education.
Okay, and those would be students with IEPs? Okay.
Yes.
And then but we're not talking about how many, the ones that are out of district, do we get revenue for that one? Or,
So the out-of-district students, we don't necessarily get revenue for students that we send out of district. There is a slide later in the presentation to
Okay.
talk about our current out-of-district tuition
I'll
that
wait
we are
then.
paying.
I'll wait for that
Sure,
then.
no
Thank
worries.
thank you, I really appreciate this.
Welcome.
Yep.
Okay, continue.
So,
You.
this is still me. And then we can see the changes at the high school level over time. And we could see that back in 2020, we had 3,400 students with in our high schools, and we're down to 3,102 this current year. Part of the facility study, we're actually looking at over the next 3 years that we're projected to lose another 500 students at the high school level. But you can see whether it was the 3,400 number or the 3,100, our class size still at the high school is about 13 students.
Could you just explain the reasons for the anticipated drop?
Kind of related earlier, as we've seen a declining enrollment from K through 8 over the last couple of years. So when we follow the cohorts, we can see the number of students who are, it's just less students going to the high school. And I think, again, we've seen that over the trend over the last decade, is that there's just less students going through. But that next wave will be at the high school.
Did you accidentally mute?
I was told I wasn't on,
Yeah.
people couldn't hear me.
No audio.
Okay.
Are you recording?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
as long as that's happening.
yeah.
Okay, we may not have audio.
So it's been a change of, again, housing market birth rate and then just declining enrollment. This is the cohort over the next 3 years, there'll just be less students at the high school.
Okay. Alderman Johnson?
Thank you. Can you just repeat how many less students you're going to have over the next 3 years?
500 at the high school,
500.
approximately.
500. May I continue?
Yes.
Do we know if they've gone to BG, a lot of them, by some chance? Bishop Girton, if the parents took them out of the public
Well, the
system?
projection is these students are currently in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay,
So that's the cohort going through.
okay. And I remember being on the board during COVID, right after COVID, that's when we started seeing a lot of the decline, because when we were locked up,
Yep.
parents didn't send a lot of the kids back. And maybe I'll mention it quickly now. I mean, if we go back to the redistricting study, which nobody like Mr. Smith, he projected this, I agreed with him, and now it's coming to fruition here that our population is declining here. And I would suggest, and I got a copy of it because I couldn't find it, but I have it with me tonight, Mr. Smith's, with that whole redistricting. I think people really need to take a look at that whole study, because people didn't like about the closing of the schools and the population declining, but it's happening. Thank you very much.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. So, I mean, I think the goal here is to increase population over time. So it's hard to look at a study where we're showing a decrease when the goal here in Nashua is to give people more places to live and hopefully bring, the goal would always to be bring more families in. But my point, going back to her original question about BG, do you have any, and I know it's not under your purview, but any numbers of whether, BG is going up or down in enrollment and the private elementary and middle school, what their enrollment is, I guess?
So we do an analysis. What we notice is that we lose students from 5th grade to 6th grade, and the students actually come back in 9th grade. And so we lose the middle school years, so we see a decrease in our middle school and actually an increase in our high school, because the students who actually, and we do the reentry interviews, that we actually are We have robust, comprehensive high schools, some of the best in the state, between our CTE programs, our AP programs. So a lot of the charter schools do not offer what we offer at the high school. So we lose students, it's been the trend, we lose students from 5th to 6th grade, and then they come back in 9th grade. So even though that's the projection, as we're looking at our middle school, those numbers might actually be higher, because those families might come back in 9th grade. So,
just a follow-up
and that's
to
been the trend.
Follow-up?
So, and BG would be a school, we probably wouldn't want to look at their enrollment up and down, because they're not getting just Nashua students, they're getting students from all over for different reasons, sports being one of them. For particular sports might be advantageous for them to go there, where other things might not be. So it's hard to look at that and compare it to Nashua in a way, right?
Yeah, and the other thing about BG is legacy. My grandfather went there, my father went there, my uncle went there, it's a family, and so that's a different kind of conversation as well. So they might not be leaving because we don't offer programs, but it's
Look at
also,
Alderman Sullivan on that one.
yeah.
Alderman Gregg?
Thank you. So is Nashua an anomaly on this drop? Or are we seeing school districts across the state dropping in?
It's across the nation.
Across the
Yeah,
nation?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thanks.
So one thing we want to add, and we talk about efficiencies and moving forward, just with our class sizes here. So our high school,
May I?
Yeah, just one other thing I was going to say, you're going to get to it later on, but when these kids go to these other schools, we still have costs associated because we have to bus them, we have to pay for their special needs students, so it's not like we're losing money, it's costing us money. Alderman Clee?
Thank you. You mentioned that the class size was about 13. Is that because they have specialty type classes? So, in other words, where the other classrooms might have had math, English, science, and social studies and so on, so everybody kind of moved. Where in high school, they pick their curriculum, you have more to offer, so you tend to have smaller class sizes?
That's true.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just wanted, and I noticed that I assumed that you put that average in when you said that the average class size was 19.5 or whatever. So when we see these smaller class sizes, because they have more offerings, it's not a true feeling as to what the real class size is. So just keeping that in mind, I was curious I was trying to figure out what the average class, what the average middle school class sizes were, and the average elementary school class sizes were, versus, because the high school is going to bring that number way down.
right, and also at the high school, most of I look at the master schedule.
Right.
And so we might have, our AP classes might have some that are like 12 in that we're
Right.
running, but other AP sections are at 25, 26. So there's a variance
Right.
between.
I get
And it's based on student selection.
Yeah, I know.
And then doing the master schedule.
Yeah.
So it varies, and again, I think the high schools are really creative.
Yep, thank you.
In this budget, and we'll talk about some of the reductions, so I charged the high school administration this year to redesign the high school. We knew we were going to come into a tight fiscal ask, and if we did nothing, and Mr. Gray will talk about this in a little while, if we did nothing to our budget and we just rolled it over, it would be an 8% ask. And so we knew an 8% ask is unrealistic. So as I mentioned earlier, we right-sized our elementary schools about 3 years ago. We right-sized our middle school when we did a redesign or redistricting. This year, I charged the high schools to redesign their programs. And this was a huge ask, and I need to really commend the high school administration. They worked with their department chairs to come up with a new schedule. And so we're moving away from the 4x4 block to a five-period block. And what this does, and again, I commend our department chairs, we've had communication with the NTU to make sure we weren't violating any contracts, but we changed the amount of sections teachers are teaching. So in a this is a department with 16 teachers. So in the current schedule, teachers teach six classes a year. So if there's 16 teachers with 6 classes, we offer 96 sections. We're moving to a 5-block schedule next year, so now teachers will be teaching in 1 extra class. So we only need 14 teachers to teach, who are teaching 7 classes, and now we're offering 98 sections. So the teacher load is going to change, but we will not eliminate a single class in the program of studies unless there's low enrollment. So no impact to the program of studies, but what it'll end up doing is causing some efficiencies that we need less teachers to offer the same amount of classes. And we're working with the teachers to make sure that there's professional development, that study halls are not unmanned, so in working with the schedule. So I'll answer some questions to clarify.
Alderman Kelly?
I'm wondering if I'm the only one with a high school, maybe 2 of us. Also would be very upset if I didn't ask. Does this 5-block still include E-block?
So that was it was actually interesting. So we met with some students, and that was the biggest issue, right? And so it's kind of, the history is when E-block kind of first came in, it was not well received. It was kind of a little chaotic, and then they evened it out. And then the first iteration of this schedule eliminated E-block. And, right? And
That's
so,
when I got yelled at.
Yep,
Yeah.
so, so this is where we're at right now in the high school administration. I'm like, all right, so what can we do differently? And so we are looking at bringing back E-block, but it's going to look differently. And so there will still be time for clubs. Instead of having 45 minutes every single day, we're looking at times that it would be a longer block, maybe every other week for like 90 minutes or 2 hours. So we heard loud and clear from our students and faculty and staff that they actually valued this time. And so we will be modifying the schedule to incorporate E-block in some fashion. So it will come back. It might not look like it right now, but we heard loud and clear that there'll be some variation of E-block moving forward.
I appreciate that. I know I tied it to my daughter, but I think in general, equity and being able to participate in clubs during class
Yep.
was something that I heard really.
And I just think that's,
enjoy.
again, I give a lot of credit to the high school administration and working with the teachers and students to say, what do we really value? And let's not get stuck in a box. Like, let's go back to what's driving our education, and if we have to tweak things, we can tweak things.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Take this slide out and explain to me what this does and how it changes the high school.
So this is where we're eliminating, so from a program of studies point of view, it does not change the high school. What it does is we eliminate 2 teachers in a section. So now when we ask for our budget request, we're reducing almost 20 high school teachers without impacting the offerings to students.
So it reduces head count but keeps services the same.
Correct. Is that,
Yep,
yep,
that's it.
that's where I thought you were going.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay, continue.
All right. So this next slide, as folks are aware, we received an email back in December of 2025 with the mayor's guideline. We were asked from a guideline standpoint to stick around 3%. So we're going to go ahead and show exactly where we've come in and then what the proposal is for fiscal year 27's budget. Next slide. So a couple things to highlight, major increases in fiscal year 2027. First thing, transportation, no particular order here either. So transportation, we're gonna see increase by about 1.7 million. Just from a friendly reminder standpoint, this is year 2 of a 5-year contract that we signed with First Student. We were aware that in year 1 and 2 of the contract, we would see some pretty hefty increases, and then year 3, 4, and 5, we should end up seeing roughly a 5% increase related to transportation. We had to go ahead and add, or the recommendation is to add some additional money for our special education transportation students, as well as our McKinney-Vento population. We currently are paying just over $482 per bus per day. Next year's contract, again, based off of that roughly 16% increase, is going to cost us $550.34 per day. Currently, we have about 95 buses. That is made up of 52 regular education buses and 43 special education buses. The next item to highlight is staffing services. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen a significant increase in staffing services. This is our population. If teachers, paras, support staff are calling out sick, we do need to go ahead and support our classrooms for our students. So we are seeing a pretty big increase year over year. We do have ESS, which is a subbing company that we contract with every year. And based off of forecast, it makes sense to go ahead and recommend an increase in staffing services.
Why don't we let them finish this slide, and then we'll take questions.
Perfect, thank you for that. Education assistance, recommendation to increase $70,000. We're seeing that more teachers are utilizing the educational assistance, as well as some additional contracts. We're seeing more professional development and some additional degrees coming forward. As mentioned in a previous slide, we're looking to hire 4 new ELL teachers next year. We have 2 collective bargaining units that were recently negotiated, NASP and the clerical unit. IT, we have a pretty significant or a decent increase for our IT core network infrastructure and switch. That's going to cost just about $253,000. Plant operations, you're seeing an increase right around $200,000. The biggest driver there is an electric increase related to a new contract. Your 2 biggest buckets of increases are contract services related to special education. The recommendation initially is to put $3.5 million in the operating budget, which currently we have $1.7 million budgeted, and then $1.5 million in our special revenue fund, which we currently have $500,000 budgeted. And the last bullet point on this slide is out-of-district tuition, an increase of $1 million in the operational budget. The current budget is $6.2 million year over year, and we'll share in a slide in a couple minutes. We've seen this area significantly increase as well. The suggestion would be to add another $1 million to the operation budget, bringing that closer to $7.2 million, and also doing an increase into the special revenue account, bringing that budget up to $1 million. Questions?
Alderman Johnson?
Thank you. Why was there such a big increase in the transportation budget?
So as mentioned previous, this is year 2 of a 5-year contract. When we signed the contract last year with First Student, after we went through an RFP process, we knew that we were going to have to take an increase at some point. The suggestion was to go ahead and do the bigger increases in year 1 and 2 of a contract. We had a lot of buses that were aged out. So that is part of the driving factor. We had a contract that was prior to COVID, so our rates were pretty low. And then year 3, 4, and 5 of this contract, we should be sitting right around roughly a 5% increase. In addition to year 2 of this contract, as mentioned, also some additional money in there for special education transportation and our McKinney-Vento transportation.
Has there been any pushback from the bus company because of the increase in fuel prices?
At this time, there hasn't. We do have a contract with them, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that contract keeps us in place because gas is
Well,
definitely
they certainly
increased.
aren't going to be making any profits they were anticipating.
Yeah.
Alderman Johnson, follow up?
Yeah, thank you. How come, I know a lot of people call me about this, there's a lot of buses that you see empty, like the high school, going to and from the high schools during the day, empty buses, seeing them coming out of the South School in the morning and in the afternoon. That must be costing us quite a bit of money. Even though we sell bus passes, that doesn't cover the cost to operate them. So are we going to see combining of routes to minimize the cost here a little bit?
So we do research the ridership, and ridership is extremely low. Even though people pay for bus passes, there's families that sign up for buses and never take a bus. So, but we do look at it. We did look at consolidating some routes. And right now, our average route is about 50 minutes. So if we start combining routes, we might have students on a bus for 90 minutes up to 2 hours.
You better
If
put a
we start-
bathroom in the back.
Excuse me?
You better put a bathroom in the back.
Yeah. So we do look at those efficiencies, we do look at ridership, and then we also know we don't want students on a bus for 90 minutes. So part of the routes, it's hard to consolidate because where the buses are going, but we do examine that.
May I continue?
Continue.
Thank you. Well, I mean, if your ridership is lower at the high school, and we're running these big buses, and especially to and from the school during the day to take the different classes, would it be maybe more prudent to have smaller buses or to have vans rather than spending all this money? Because this is a big bus. How much diesel fuel are we using on this to fill up these buses? And they're not being utilized.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's a cost factor.
No, I 100% agree, but when we look at the families who sign up, there might be 80 students at the beginning who sign up for the bus and only 10 ride. So what happens if all 80 students actually take the bus that day? So you can't buy a van and a bus, right? Like you're
Well,
gonna be,
and I get that, but I mean, I'm looking at this from a cost factor also. The sale of the bus ticket doesn't,
no, it
it
doesn't.
doesn't,
Nope.
the money doesn't cover the cost of the bus. And then I have another question on something else after.
Okay, but you realize that if they sign up, and you have to have a bus for them, and if
I get it.
everybody showed up, I think some of the people take a bus pass as well as have a car pass, because if the car breaks down, they can't get to school.
But what about when you're transporting them to and from each school, and you don't have that ridership either? You know, it's empty.
So I just want to add some clarity if I can. So the $550.34, that's going to be the daily cost for next year. So that is per bus. There are some additional costs that we do incur for whether it's late day buses, midday buses, or what you're referring to is the shuttle buses between north and south during the day for some of the CTE programs. So I just don't want the message to be out there that it's $550 for these shuttle buses. It's not. It is $550 per bus, and then there are some additional costs if they are running kind of those middays.
Another question?
Yeah, I've got some questions. How many buses again are we running?
So we have 95 buses currently. That's made up 52 regular, 43 special ed buses,
How many, 43?
43 special education buses.
Yeah, it's right there on the slide.
I can find it.
Yeah. One other question on the staffing services. Because when I was on the board, we had to do this because of COVID. And so how much of an increase are we doing every year?
So this hasn't been increased actually in the past 2 years. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've always gone over budget in staffing services, which is why there is a recommendation, instead of leaving it at a $950,000 budget, the suggestion would be to increase that by $275,000. For fiscal year, and it's on screen, but in case it's hard for folks to see, for fiscal year 2025, we actually spent $1,256,000 in staffing services. And again, this is for our staff that are calling out for various reasons, and we need support staff in front of our students.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. I had a couple questions around the bus as well, and then I have one other. So, do we have a number of buses that are in the contract? Do we have to have a certain number of routes?
So our contract is built actually off of, I believe it was 92 buses at the current time that we went ahead and built the RFP.
I don't love the idea of having longer routes, but I was just wondering around that. And then in terms of the student fees, I know it doesn't cover it at all. Is it comparable to what other districts charge? Have we ever upped it? What does that look like? Not that I want to pay more, but.
So we pay, I think right now it's about $65 per student for a bus pass. I think that's pretty standard. We have not done an increase, as far as I'm aware, in the last 3 to 5 years.
And then my other question, if I could,
Follow up?
IT core network infrastructure. My question around that was there was discussion around consolidating the two IT programs.
Isn't
Would
there
it make
another slide on that coming up? Can we wait?
Can I just ask my question, please? You
you're
can
talking
touch on
IT.
it when you get there, but I'm just wondering why we would do this before we made that consolidation.
Yeah, so the consolidation, think of that as a staffing model. So by us going ahead and doing a consolidation of staffing with the city of Nashua, the IT core infrastructure switch, it basically is a core switch, and I'm no IT person, but it is a core switch that needs to be replaced at one of our high schools. Luckily, at this time, we don't need 2 of those, but we are currently working with the team to go through some RFPs to understand. Hopefully, it doesn't cost more than that.
Okay, thank you.
I think I had Alderman T-Bone,
I'm good, and my question was answered through all.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. When I was looking at the budget, I noticed, bottom line, year-over-year lift was about 14 million. So of that 14 million, 10 million of it was salaries and benefits. So maybe this isn't another slide, so maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
Pick to the next slide.
It is, okay.
Please,
All right.
excuse me.
I can wait.
Then I'll park my question.
Just, well, no, you were going there, so we might as well go to that next slide
think
for
there
you,
was-
unless there was another question, sorry on this.
Alderman Lopez, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple. So one of them is kind of based on an assumption, so I want to make sure that I am corrected before I get too far afield. But with the staffing costs that you mentioned being essentially the solution to a staff member that is going to be out sick or away is to use contract services. But in past years, I believe, Superintendent Andre, you said that we haven't lost teachers, we've moved them into admin. So are any of those staff members still certified teachers that could be a contingency, and is that already done, or is there a reason that it couldn't be?
So I just want to be clear. So the contracted services here we're talking about is ESS, it's our daily subs. So
So that's not staffing services if somebody's out?
that's, so,
Can I hop in?
Yeah.
Sorry. So staffing services related on screen for 275, that is our ESS for staffing services of teachers and para and support staff not showing up. That is not our contract service staff. There is a bullet point up here related to contract services. So we kind of have 2 different buckets.
Okay.
So staffing services, again, is if I'm a teacher, I call out sick for whatever reason tomorrow, we need a teacher in front of our kiddos tomorrow. Staffing services, ESS is the company, they go ahead and fill kind of that daily sub.
Okay.
Contract services is if we can't go ahead and hire support staff, that's why we're seeing an increase in contract services.
Okay, but specifically the ESS and the staffing increase that we're looking at here, is there a way to do that in-house, particularly if their credentialing is there? If we're in a situation, for example, where we're going to ask teachers to teach 7 classes instead of 5, that seems like it would increase the vulnerability. If one of those teachers is like, I slipped on a banana and I'm out for a week, then,
so what ESS does is a lot of the HR work. It's recruiting of the substitute teachers, the retaining, the onboarding, that aspect of it. So that's a burden. If it's not ESS, it'll be on our HR department, where someone calls out sick, and then to find the substitute. So that's a lot of the, like a third-party work. We ran a number the other day, and we'll pick on the high schools, right? So the high school, there's an admin team of 6 administrators. So if there's 10 teachers out sick, 6 administrators can't cover those classes. Right? So like administrators not going in, but ESS is always recruiting for more and more substitute teachers. So it's just not a matter of having a building principal or somebody else going to cover those classes, or a retired teacher. Like a retired teacher would be in the ESS pool to be a daily sub. But they're helping us with the management. And just to put it in numbers, we ran this a figure last month. We had over 12,000 absences between our teachers, administrators, and paraeducators up to last month.
And is,
So
just as a
that's-
follow-up, sorry.
So that's the cost of how many substitutes do you need, and we, pay $125 a day?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just for scope, it is a regular situation in the school, high school or otherwise, that there might be more teachers out than admin even available?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do a lot of last minute planning and contingency organizing, and that's probably why having that staffing pool is important.
Yes, and it lessens the burden on our HR department to make those calls and all the screening and the recruiting.
Okay, and then I had one question about transportation.
Okay.
With regards to well, I guess I had two questions because I have to understand it first. The limiting criteria for the special education transportation, is that physical limitations, like you can't have beyond a certain number of people in special education on a bus at a time? Is that physical, like access, you need to have handicap accessible? What makes us need to use a special education bus instead of a regular one?
It's driven by the IEP and then the needs of the student. So depending if the student has, needs like a wheelchair or other factors or supports, it depends really on the IEP team. So like if a student just has an IEP that has reading services, might be on a regular ed bus, but if a student might be in an intensive needs classroom, that might be on a special needs special education bus. So it's really driven by the team and depending on what the student needs. And then first student works with Crystal and her department on making sure that there's adequate supports on that bus to support the child.
So the fact that you assess that on an individual student is obviously labor intensive. It is gratifying because as a legally blind person, every time I tell an airline I need to board on time so I can see where I'm going, there's also a wheelchair waiting for me, so they're not really making any differentiation between what one special need is versus other. So making sure that we're not just putting everybody on a bus because they're identified with an IEP is gratifying. Is there any possibility for partnership or collaboration either with our national transit system, which is like run by a cousin of First Student, or even Boys and Girls Club or PAL, where maybe they're going to pick the child up anyway? Parents expect them to do that, so that coordinating communication means that we can reduce some of the burden on the school.
Yeah, so I wouldn't look into that partnership for our special education transportation. I think that's very individualized. We did look at some routes last year when we were having the conversation with our going out for contract with, like, are there routes that can be consolidated? And quite honestly, the National Transit Authority doesn't run enough routes to get our students, like, without taking 3 or 4 buses to get to the high schools.
I had one.
Efficiently.
I was thinking the paratransit actually, but I had one final question. The age ranges of students using paratransits, I understand, and again, this is an assumption, so you can correct me. If we have students that are still going to school, like for high school types of schools, into their 20s, maybe we could do an alternative transportation because they're old enough, but they're still not done their curriculum?
So again, it goes back to the IEP team, and that might be a conversation that it might be a goal part of their transition plan, like when they exit at 22, but it might be how do you use public transportation? How do you use alternate planning? But we would still, again, through the IEP team, make those appropriate decisions on what, ensuring that a student can get to and go home from school.
On some of your
Alderman Dowd?
IEP buses, do they have to have a second adult other than the driver?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to make it clear for people.
Alderman Dowd, Alderman Sennett says his hand's been up, but you can't see him because of the presentation.
Oops. He's got a question? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yep.
Alderman Sennett?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for my tardiness. Before we moved on from transportation, I did have a question. In regard to the special education increases, I know I'm not the only person who's aware of a reconfiguration in the special ed program. Is any of that driving the cost increase for those transportation services?
No, there is I'll let Dr. Andre follow up afterwards. Based off of the transportation increase, this is purely based off of the contract that we have with First Student.
All right. I had a follow-up if I could.
Go ahead, follow up.
All right, just on the subject of transportation while we're there. I know that First Student is essentially our sole option, but it seems year over year, especially at the beginning of the school year, but throughout as well, I'm hearing from a lot of constituents, a lot of growing pains in regard to how the routes are laid out, stops that they're having trouble getting their students to, late buses. I know that, again, they're the only player in town and we're beholden to a contract. But long-term, how sustainable do we see our partnership with First Student? I know a lot of changes are in the pipeline that will affect the transportation aspect of the school department. And is this our best fit going forward, or are we just kind of over a barrel?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So when we did the RFP process last year, we actually had only 3 transportation companies at the table. First Student obviously received that RFP award. I would say for the next 5 years, we're in a contract with First Student. The major drivers that we're really seeing, not only because of the increase in the contract, but we're starting to see more of our McKinney-Vento population and some of our special ed costs really increasing. We do get, and not to cloud judgment, but we do get a little bit of money from the state, from a federal grant for some of our McKinney-Vento students, but it is not much. And we are seeing an increase in our students who are in between homes at this point. So if folks are not aware, if it is a Nashua student and they are displaced from their residence and they have found housing in Manchester, we do have to legally support that transportation from Manchester to Nashua and then home. That is one of the biggest driving factors in addition to the contract related to transportation.
And if I could just add, I know it seems like we pick on First Student a lot, but First Student has been a great partner with us over a number of years. I think the public should know the first couple weeks of school are a little rocky. What we do, and I encourage families to reach out to the transportation office, and Crystal feels a burden of this. We adjust a lot of routes the first 10 days of school, where someone's like, this isn't working, it might be, they feel it, they're unsafe. So we make adjustments the first couple days, or first 10 days, and we do that year over year. And so we'll continue to do that. So please, and families haven't been shy to contact us, please continue to contact us. We're getting better. What we see, as we talked about staffing services in our district, First Student is actually having issues with finding drivers. And so we have a monthly call with them. We look at how many times a month that they have to combine routes and kind of double up. So, and there's in the contract, if they don't meet a certain threshold, then we get some reimbursement. So we look at those figures, but they are also struggling to find enough drivers and substitutes. And that's where sometimes buses are late, and that's out of our control. But we are in good communication with First Student. I know a couple years ago, it was a dumpster fire on a lot of stuff. I mean, I'll say it, it was painful. We're in a much better place this year, and we know next year will be better.
Thank you both for the clarification.
All our divisions are having a problem with ELL drivers. DPW now is hiring people and training them to get their ELL license.
CDL
license, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had so many questions about that.
CDL license. So it's been a problem across the board. There just aren't enough of them. Let's see, I have Alderwoman Kelly.
I don't have anything.
Nothing, okay. Alderman Clee.
Thank you. My comments, mine are more comments than, as someone who actually sat and watched the Franklin Street buses where you have a lot of the special needs students and so on, I can tell you that they come in all different sizes. Sometimes they hit, and the bus company determines what size bus it's going to be based on what they have available as well as population. Because I asked that same question of the principal there, and he explained that to me sometimes. And the reason I had asked these questions was because there's such a hard turn they have to go in there without affecting the residents. So, and I want to say that, you know, I thought it was amazing getting those students onto these buses with the lift and so on, and those students are scared. The bus drivers are absolutely amazing. They talk to these kids, they get to know these children, these kiddos, and so on. So I commend you all for doing that. And the bus company, and correct me if I'm wrong, they do have a certain determination as to what size bus they're going to send. Am I correct on that?
Yep, you're correct. So we technically have 3 different
Right.
bus sizes. We have kind of your standard, regular transportation.
tinier, and
You
then-
have a mid-size, and then you have a smaller, normally special education
Right.
bus that also tends to have a wheelchair lift.
Yep. And I did see that. And the other comment that I have is, you were right about the hellfire that we went through with the bus situation. At that point, I was getting people calling me saying that their kids were on the bus for 90 minutes or sometimes even 2 hours. And by the time they got home, did their homework and everything, they had no other time. So, you know, I hope we can keep that bus ride for the kids less than 60 minutes, because it does affect everything that they do from that point on, their homework and everything. And if you're really looking at the needs of the children and the kiddos, I think it's very important to do this. Thank you.
The other thing, if you notice at the high school, sometimes there are buses that aren't for a student, they're from Merrimack, and I can't remember the others I've seen, but there are some other buses from out of town that pick up their students that are going to Nashua for one reason or the other.
Correct.
Okay, I think I have Derek.
All right, so this,
Nope.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just want to add a question. So, you know, you're right about, Dr. Andrade, about, you know, changing of the routes. I've seen that in my neighborhood, changing of them in the first 10 days. So, first student, so last year was the first year of the contract, but it wasn't the first time we've used them, correct?
Correct.
And
Yep.
so, last year was that big bump that's where we got a lot of, I don't want to say complaint, but just a lot of like, hey, why is this so much? Why is the school budget going up? And again, this year it's going up 15%, which again, because of the way you guys have the contract structured, it's in the beginning. You had said before that we had 3 RFPs. And can you explain why we didn't pick the other 2 last year? Just because, you know, if new people walked in here and they didn't hear us last year, and which I'm sure happens, can you explain why we didn't go with the other 2 compared to first student?
Yeah, absolutely. Primarily was because of cost. First student, from a costing standpoint, was the best price. Based off of the RFP, the other 2 companies coming forward would have cost us significantly more than what we're currently paying. One of the companies, they didn't even have like a fleet of buses, so there was going to be a cost to go ahead and find a place to store all the buses, plus buy roughly 100 buses for us. Because they do have a couple buses almost as like backup, right? If one breaks down, they still have a job to do. So it really was that, and then the partnership. We've had a good standing relationship with First Student. Last year was clunky, and I can't say it was just First Student. We had a new transportation system. We had a turnover in the transportation director seat. I think I played transportation point of contact for a while. So it was clunky for families, for sure. I hope this year is better. And again, to Dr. Andrade's point, if it's not, please call. Be happy to even make an adjustment if we need to right now for various reasons.
Great, thank you.
Thank
The
you.
other thing people don't understand sometimes is First Student has a huge facility on Burke Street
That is
for
correct.
housing, maintaining buses, repairing them. And it's not just for the Nashua buses, it's for several communities around here. They all operate out of Burke Street.
Yes.
Any other questions before we move on? Seeing none, go ahead.
All right, next slide here, Mr. Sullivan. If I don't answer your question, please let me know, but I think this is where you were going. So based off of everything we've talked about, if we went ahead and rolled over the budget, plus did these increases, major increases for FY 2027, What we would be coming forward with is an 8.8% increase. We know that is not feasible. We understand, and that is without benefits. We understand that is a long shot. That would put a huge tax increase for all of the residents, so we are not doing that. But I did want to go ahead and point out, again, year over year, what is our major increases related to the budget? What makes up this overall pie chart? Really 75–80% of it is our labor and benefits. You got some utilities in there. Transportation, as we talked about, is increasing. Tuition out of district is increasing. Your special education pupil support services, that's where your contract services sits. Also your OT, your PT services are in there. And then all other expenses is your supplies, your school level budgets, et cetera. So again, it would be an 8.8% increase. That is not what we're asking for. Alderman Sullivan, did we answer your question, or did you want to point something out?
No, that's good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Tebow?
So I know you're probably going to answer this, but because I see it on this slide, I figure I'll bring up the elephant in the room. So 45% of this, in this proposed 8.8%, is the special ed support services. Now, I know out there in the world, there's truth, myth, whatever, that you're proposing to, I don't want to use the word segregate, that's what people are using, but pool or try to do something where special ed students are in classes together in one school, and maybe because the 45% increase would have been too much, this is a way to get that cost down. Can you just, I'll give you open floor to speak about that a little bit, because I hear different things out there, and if it becomes a segregation, I don't think I could support that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to give you an opportunity to address.
So we actually have a couple slides just in case that
Okay.
came up tonight.
Okay, I can wait.
Just so we've kind of prepared for that.
Okay.
So we'll get into that a little bit. And just for everyone to know, there's no special education school. So
Okay.
no matter what school students may be assigned to, there will always be opportunities for inclusion. They will be with general education students.
Okay, I can
So-
wait till the slide.
Yeah,
too,
so
but
I
thank
just,
you.
yeah.
Sure.
Alderman Johnson?
Thank you. I have a question regarding the utilities from
Yeah.
a member of the audience because they couldn't speak at the beginning. How was the electricity budget calculated? What rates were assumed? The energy manager told us that the city was buying a tool to be used specifically for eliminating energy costs. Did you use that tool?
So the energy increase did go through an RFP process. I believe, and we can clarify, that we worked in conjunction with the city of Nashua to make sure that we were following all proper channels. And unfortunately, based off of the increase with a lot of things, we are seeing a pretty big increase in electricity this year.
So, may I
Follow up?
follow? Yeah. We did all these solar panels on the schools. How is that saving us money? Are we getting a good return on the money? Because I remember Mr. Donovan was saying that we weren't at one point. So are we starting to see a return on the dollar, or was this a mistake to put all these solar panels up?
So I hate to follow Mr. Donovan's commentary, but we are not necessarily seeing a significant return on the investment at this time. Mr. Smith did go ahead and do a presentation, I believe, to the Finance and Operations Committee a couple months ago on what is the overall kickback that we are getting from the several solar panels that are on our buildings. We are getting some back. I think at this point, it probably hasn't been enough time for us to be seeing that certain percentage back that we as a district had hoped. But again, we are seeing a little bit, but probably not where we expected longer term.
I'm so glad
I can
didn't
say
vote.
that the electricity increase would have been significantly more had we not had the solar panels on the school buildings we have. Plus, the high school was had a complete energy efficiency program that saved a lot of money in electricity in the high schools. And there are other aspects of energy savings that Mr. Smith is trying to put forward with LED lighting in a lot of the schools.
I do a follow-up.
Follow up.
Thank you. I can't remember, what was the cost, the total cost for us to do all of these schools with the solar panels, to get the return on the dollar?
Zero.
It didn't cost us anything?
Didn't cost us anything. It's a public-private partnership. I don't want to answer in front of,
But
but
that's
I was
okay.
involved with that.
Okay.
And
Because I wasn't on the joint special.
the companies installed them. We get the benefits from the electricity. Of course, they get a profit too.
Of course.
It was put in by private investors. And at the end of, I think it's 5 or 6 years, we have the opportunity to buy the systems if we wanted to, or we can just continue. The other thing that's, if the government goes through and allows us, and we can use batteries, we can store electricity from the not used in those schools and run the schools even longer with the electricity we generate on the schools. So there are things coming downstream, but we have to change certain people in Washington because they've just cut the public-private partnership out.
Let's not talk about Washington, we're talking about local government.
Alderwoman Kelly?
I was just going to bring up the power purchase agreement.
cover the
As I
sign.
recall, we did a power purchase agreement, so it didn't cost us up front, and that return on our investment will come when we have the opportunity to buy them. I also wanted to point out that there's a misconception that the solar on your house goes into your house. It goes out back into the grid and then comes back. So when all of the energy prices goes up, it still goes up. It's not like you're just harvesting it into your home.
Alderman T-Bone?
Thank you. I'm just looking at what you've used so far up into March 30th, I guess, for electricity. And it looks like, you know, if you plan it out for the rest of the budget season here, it's going to be right about almost spot on to where we budgeted last year. So, I mean, we're not coming in, you know, sometimes people say, oh, why didn't you budget? Why'd you budget so much over when it was so much under? When, in this case, it looks like the schools are going to be right on. I know in changing, you know, having McCarthy open up and having that hopefully more efficient, and I know we've used Elm Street a little bit, but that's not under you guys anymore, so that comes to us. So even though we have some savings there, that didn't translate enough to stop an increase in, I mean, I guess if they give you a higher rate, they give you a higher rate, and we just got to do the best we can to negotiate that, and whatever that rate goes up is what we end up having to pay. But I assume McCarthy must give us some value in just having more efficient. I mean, Elm Street was old and probably not so efficient to run, I would assume.
I'd be happy to reshare the presentation that Mr. Smith did present at the Finance and Ops meeting for the Board of Aldermen.
Sure,
Yep.
thank you.
Let's see, okay, Alderman Clee?
Yeah, just a quick question. If you don't know it offhand, that's fine. What are we paying per kilowatt hour? Do we know that? Based on the contract?
I'm not 100% positive. I wouldn't want to quote that, so let me follow up
Yes,
for you.
just share it with
Yep.
But I
Alderman Dowdy.
believe the school department has a separate contract than the city does.
Right. Yeah, they
With a
do.
lower rate. And Mr. Smith could answer that.
Thank you.
All right, so the next slide here actually is a slide that was shared earlier in September. So there was a presentation that was done September 9th of 2025, again, at a Finance and Operations Committee meeting related to special education and just some of the increase that we've seen year over year. So I wanted to include some of the slides in our budget presentation for some clarity. So a couple things to point out. Contract services has dramatically increased over the past 4 years. Back in fiscal year 2022, we spent about $33,000, and for fiscal year 2026, at this point, we had originally said we were going to spend close to $4 million. That amount has changed. You'll see later in the presentation. With that being said, please remember, we don't have ESSER funds anymore. I continue to say there is no ESSER money tree sitting in the backyard at district office. It's the reality. So in addition, what truly has changed? There's been a change in our student demographics. Again, as we saw, a decrease in enrollment with an increase of the proportions of special education students that have been identified. This was prior to COVID. And it's a lot harder now to hire some of these teachers, some of these support staff, individuals to come into our schools. It's not just us as Nashua School District that is struggling. It's nationwide, for sure. Not a lot of staff are going into teaching positions, unfortunately. Just some historical information related to ESSER. Again, ESSER funds are now gone. There were a couple activities that we did spend some ESSER dollars on. So related to ESSER 1, 2, and 3, you can see the amount that we originally spent on contract services related to special education. And then part of the presentation, again, we'll go through exactly the increases related to contract services and tuition out of district. Next slide, please. All right, so an overview of our special education out-of-district student enrollment. So these are the students that we cannot support in-house as the Nashua School District. So unfortunately, we do need to go ahead and send them out of district. So over the last 5 years, we have some numbers up on the screen of how many current students we have as tuition out of district. These numbers can drastically change day to day. Knock on wood, we potentially could receive a call tomorrow and there's a couple kiddos that are court placed here. We can't support their needs, then we do need to send them out of district if that is the case. Some of these out of district placements per student does cost anywhere from $75,000 all the way up to about $300,000, $350,000 per student. It is a cost that unfortunately we do not have a lot of control over. We are seeing a slight decrease this year in our out-of-district students, with roughly 111 students as out-of-district at this time.
Can I just ask a question? I just read something that the state, over a certain amount of money for these types of students, is supposed to pay like 80% over a certain dollar amount, and they're not coming anywhere close to it.
That
Can
is
you
cor-
address that?
Yeah, that is correct. So there is what they consider a cap. So depending on the student's needs, there are caps anywhere from like $75,000 up to like $150,000. If we have met that cap for the student, then their state is supposed to go ahead and reimburse us or pay for that remaining service. We are seeing that decreased as well.
But they aren't giving us that extra money.
That is correct.
Okay, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. If you can go back 2 slides, please. I just want to see, I want to square this. If I'm reading that right, the cost of special education has gone up 121x since fiscal year 2022. Our student population has gone up less than 1%. Help me math that math.
So I don't want to punt your question. Can you give me 2 more slides and I'll show you some more numbers that I think you're going to have more questions around?
Okay, all right.
Please.
You're always ahead of the game, John.
I know, I should just
All
wait.
right.
I'll just wait.
It's the next slide after this, I promise.
Okay.
So the slide here up on screen is special education costing funding sources. Sometimes it kind of gets a little cloudy on what are the funding sources that we receive or what are the expenses that we need to go ahead and spend related to special education. So it's helpful to share that we have the operational budget, which is essentially what you folks are voting on. We also get an IDEA grant every single year. This is related to our students with individual learning disability plans. We have a special revenue account. We have a trust fund account, and then we do receive state revenue related to special education. Next.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Alderman Johnson?
Yeah. What is the percentage the federal government gives us on the IDEA?
So IDEA, from an estimate standpoint for next year, and again, it's on a slide coming in a couple minutes, But we received this year about $3.6 million in IDEA.
All set?
All
Okay,
right.
continue.
Alderman Sullivan, I think this is a slide we're going to talk about.
Look at this, baby.
Yeah, sorry for all the numbers, but I think this was the cleanest way to explain this story. So contract services specifically related to special education. So if we look back from fiscal year 2022, again, we had about $30,000 budgeted related to our contract services. Again, this was during ESSER, so this does not, the asterisk up at the top, does not include any ESSER funds. We spent about $33,000 in 2022. Let's hop to fiscal year 2025. So back in 2025, just last year, we had 1.6 million budgeted. That was a makeup of 1.5 out of the operational budget, 125,000 in special revenue, and we spent in totality between both operation and special revenue $3.5 million. So you can see from 2022, a little bit of spending. ESSER took care of a majority of it. In 2023, we had about $2 million that was covered through ESSER, so you're not seeing that impact the operational budget. In 2024, you're seeing some hit the operational budget, right? We originally only budgeted $190,000 between the operational budget and special revenue. Out of those two funding sources, we spent $3.1 million plus in ESSER 3, we spent about $2 million. Fast forward to this year, and I made a presentation about this back in September, and we've been talking about this throughout the last several months. The budget we put forward for special education contract services last year, which was an increase, you can see it was an increase from what we originally budgeted in 2025, it was $2.2 million. I am forecasting at this point that we are going to spend roughly $7.9 million in contract services this year. The actuals through March 31st of 2026 is $4.2 million. Again, the reason for that, right, we're not seeing a lot of teachers go into teaching positions, especially our special education teaching positions. We're not seeing our paraeducators being hired directly through the district. We have a substantial amount of them, but we are seeing roughly about 66 paras and behavioral techs that we are currently contract servicing this year. Sorry, what did you?
No, that's exactly what I was
Okay.
saying.
Question? Alderman Sullivan?
Thanks. So if I read this correctly, what I think I'm seeing is really the shift in fiscal year 24 to 25. That's where the big jump is, because that's when ESSER went away. So what we're not seeing in the prior years is what ESSER is doing in the background. We don't see it because it's not tracked, and we have no idea what size the programs are, and maybe we say we don't care because someone else is paying the bill.
I want to say with ESSER, we absolutely have tracking on it. So I don't want it to be misunderstood that there's no tracking or no accounting system related to what ESSER funds were spent on, because there definitely is.
Okay, could I have a
From
follow-up on that?
From an operational budget standpoint, you are accurate in saying that the $2 million that was spent back in 2023 and 2024 is not reflective in this chart because ESSER is a separate funding source. It is grant funding.
Follow up?
Thank you. So if you were to put ESSER on there, put it on the chart, you wouldn't see such a spike.
I think you're still going to see a spike. You're probably not going to see as drastic of an increase between 23, 24 as you're seeing. And then really last year and this year, pretty substantially, we're seeing a big increase.
Okay. And I don't want to take up the committee's time, but this was covered in September?
Yep, so I did a presentation on September 9th of 2025. I'd be happy to send it along if folks can't find that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate
On truly a
that.
deep dive of all of this back then. I thought we were going to be right around $4 million.
Okay.
Okay, so that'll be an action item. Okay, Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. We talked a lot about paras. I know that we've increased some incentives, and I know that we've worked on their contract to try to bring more into our full-time staff. Has that been successful? I hear 66 of those paras are contracted, and then I guess my follow-up to that is, what would this look like if all of the paras that we can actually hire full-time were hired full-time?
So I just want to clarify, what do you mean, what would it look like? We would have 66 less contractors in?
Correct.
Right, so.
Number-wise,
So we
so-
budgeted for 372 paraeducators. So we had roughly about 60 openings, so we have about 300 national employees, and so 316. And then the other 60 paraeducators or RBT or contractors. So just for a quick superintendent math, a paraeducator is we budget around $30,000. And a paraeducator from a contractor might be anywhere from $45,000 to $70,000. If we bring in an RBT or a BT, that's some of the needs of the students, that can be anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000. If we bring in a contractor who's a teacher, that's over six figures. It's anywhere from $100,000 to about $120,000. And so when we're only budgeting $30,000 or $50,000 for a paraeducator or a first-year teacher, it's really hard to make up that difference when we're moving salary from a transfer from salary and wages into contract services. It's just not making up the difference.
Follow-up, please.
So we wouldn't be at $3 million.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going.
Yep.
You said, I know your rough superintendent math, you said 30,000 is about what it would cost. Does that include benefits or not
It
inclusive
does
of
not
benefits?
include benefits.
Okay. Do you know what the cost is with benefits?
We usually see about a 30% on average of a benefit cost. Again, to Dr. Andre's point, we are able to move some of the wage money to offset some of this cost. But again, with that significant delta, you're talking $3 to $4 million right there in the paraeducators.
And we're going to touch upon some of the
And I'll also watch the
staffing
deep dive.
constraints so we'll touch upon it a little later.
By the way, Alderman Senate, if you have anything, just speak up because we can't see you if you raise your hand.
Gotcha.
Okay, thanks.
All right, next
All right.
slide, please, unless there's questions. All right, this one's just a cleaner version from a chart standpoint, might be a little bit easier on the eyes, but it does go ahead and show the similar story of where we're actually going to see projected this year's costs related to contract services. Next slide. All right, the other big bucket is our tuition out of district. So we can see back in 2022, again, between the operational budget and special revenue, we roughly budgeted about $5.9 million. In 2022, we spent about $5.3 million. We saw a little bit of an increase in 2023. That jumped to just over $6 million of cost that was spent. In 2024, we saw it jump to about $7 million for tuition out of district. Again, in '24, we budgeted between the operational budget and special revenue about $6.1 million. So again, we were over budget just about $930,000. In 2025, Again, we were over budget by almost $1 million in out of district. And as of right now, we're looking a little bit lower, looking to finish this year probably about $7.1 million in tuition out of district. Next slide. Again, just a chart to show this trend over the last 5 years related to tuition out of district. This next slide is a revenue slide. How much revenue do we actually go ahead and pull in for the special education programs that we run? The way that we generate revenue here is through our Signs of Learning program, our Brentwood program, and then any students actually that are court-placed, we can go ahead and receive revenue on services that they require. We've seen a significant increase over the last several years related to this. The tuition that does come in, this goes directly into our special revenue account. Last year, we collected over $445,000 more than anticipated. This year, as of now, we've brought in $991,000, and we're projected to end right around $1.4 million. All right, more on revenue. So the revenue that we receive through various funding sources for next year's projection, I'm looking at about $67 million. How is that broken up? Medicaid. So far, Medicaid, we've collected about $416,000. We're only a couple months left. I do think we'll collect more than the $500,000 that was budgeted, but you can see in fiscal year 2025, when I came in, there really was a huge push and additional training to the staff to go ahead and do the Medicaid billing that is required for us to receive this revenue. We ended up bringing in over $1 million last year. The other funding sources, just to point out on here, so the special education aid, that aid is from our special education population. We've seen it kind of hover around roughly $1 million year over year. So far this year, we're actually seeing a percentage a little higher than the prior years. So when I ran these actuals, we've actually brought in $1.4 million at this time. State adequacy aid, from the projection at this point, we're seeing it to be slightly lower next year than what we currently have received. Again, this is an estimate. The state adequacy aid could potentially change. Just for awareness, there is a state adequacy aid calculator out there. If anybody truly wants a deep dive on it, I'm more than happy to sit with them. But just from a high level standpoint, we do receive roughly about $4,800 per student related to state adequacy aid. In addition, if the student is identified as ELL or special education, there is an additional almost like supplemental money that we receive for those students that are identified. Similar to our free and reduced lunch population, if they have an application that is approved, there is a little bit of an additional amount that we receive under that state adequacy aid. Again, this is truly just an estimate for fiscal year 27 that we're looking at to receive. And then vocational tuition is related to our CTE program. You'll actually see so far this year, $329,000 has been collected. We're seeing a lot more CTE students come to the Nashua School District, again, because we have such great offerings related to our CTE program. So we're hopeful that continues. But as of so far, we definitely have seen an increase there.
Just for the general public, could you explain what CTE is? I think we all know, but a lot of people don't.
Yep. So it is, did you want to take that one?
No, go ahead. Yeah, you're on a roll. There you go.
It is it's our classes at the high school levels that basically prep them for the real world. So there's several courses. Some are like the cosmetology classes, some are automotive classes. We have a new class or a new program coming next year related to fire services and police services. I'm missing a ton of them. There's mechanics,
So
building.
we have the second largest career and technical education center in the state. So- So I was just going to ask Mr. Gray a clarifying question. So when we say we receive the revenue, can you just, who receives the revenue?
Yep. So the revenue, anytime we receive this section of revenue, it comes directly to the Nashua, it comes right here to City Hall, and it's deposited into the revenue accounts.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. We had an offline chat before we started tonight, and you mentioned that the cost to educate students about 18,000 plus minus.
Correct.
What is the cost to educate a special ed student?
So that cost definitely varies. So when we do the DOE 25 state reporting, that is a pretty substantial report in partnership with the city of Nashua that we have to do every October, November. That's what gives us that per pupil cost. So that's the $18,000 roughly that you're referring to. That's the average cost per student. Now, it absolutely costs more for us to go ahead and educate the special education students based off of various factors, whether they have OT, PT services, right, depending on what that kind of service grid is in their IEP. Related to the report, we don't necessarily break out our regular ed students against our special education students. But if there's analysis, unless Dr. Andrade wants to add some more, we could get kind of a rough estimate of cost per pupil. But what I can share is we definitely do not get enough revenue from the state related to probably all students, clearly.
Could I have just a follow-up, please? Thank you. Bigger picture question. I watched the meeting on April 27th, and special education, there was a lot of time spent on that. And so I went down a little rabbit hole. And what I found out, and maybe you've had this discussion at the board level, so I apologize if you had, but there was research that shows that if you spend effort, read money on early development before the age of 5, that money spent, the ROI and educational outcomes for those students changes. Has that question been explored at the district level? Because if we do it, the revenue that we get from other towns, if they're not investing in early childhood, that might be an opportunity where Nashua can be that early childhood, later on special education, I guess, I'm stumbling for the words, but the preventer. You know, it's almost the antidote to help curb that a little bit and try to stop that population from growing, thus costs and whatnot.
So twofold. So Franklin Street is our early intervention for students with, and we started providing services at age 3. To some of our students.
Okay.
We know 2 years ago, so Franklin Street, I think we have close to 250 students in 2 sessions, or about 200 students in our pre-K program. I think the community would be happy to hear, and we announced this about a month ago. So about 2 years ago, we disbanded our pre-K, Title I pre-K program. That was in place when we lost about $500,000 in Title I money. Next year, we're bringing back, to your point, Mr. Sullivan, our pre-K programs. So we'll be opening up 5 pre-K programs in our Title I schools, and that's exactly to your point. So we know that's where it's a worthy investment. So we restructured our Title I grant so that we can reopen those classrooms so that more students will have access to our pre-K programs and early intervention.
All right, thank you.
And that will, again, that'll be funded through Title I and not the operating budget.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Alderman Kelly?
Sounds like the previous speaker was pushing for universal preschool. I have a question. around per pupil cost. So there's been a lot of talk around the idea that, we have less people coming to our schools, so why isn't our budget going down? So can you talk to me about if someone leaves our district, do we have $18,000 less in costs?
So the tuition definitely, so the revenue that we receive from the state does follow the student. So if we have students that do go ahead and move out, we would go ahead and lose a revenue source.
However, right, so we're not taking a bus off the road. We're not laying off a teacher. We're not turning the lights off in a classroom. We're not turning off heat. So some of those fixed costs, if we lose 100 students, so we'll lose some state aid. However, the cost to operate a building is still going to be there. So, and what's hard in some of the arguments is, if we lose 100 students to charter schools, if we lose 100 students to, why aren't we restructuring? Because the students might not be from the same grade, same classroom, or the same school. So losing 100 students across, we'll just pick on elementary, across 12 schools, does nothing to our operating budget as opposed, we just lose state aid. But we'll still have the same amount of buses, same amount of teachers, same amount of electricity that we're operating. I think that's where you're going. Yep.
If I can follow up, actually through you potentially to my colleague across the aisle here. I know there were a couple of bills at the state to try to increase the per pupil cost. I believe they all died, but I was just wondering if you know what happened.
Yeah, that's still not going very well.
Yeah, kind of figured. Thank you. I'm all set.
All right.
All right, this next slide is related to the federal grants that we receive every year. We actually just received the preliminary numbers for Title I, Title II, and Title IV for next fiscal year. Again, it's a preliminary number at this point, but they're actually a little bit higher than what the estimates are up on screen. But in totality, we roughly receive anywhere between $11.2 million for state aid. For next year, again, I would say we're going to be roughly right around $10 million. And then we do get some type of indirect costs back. That's almost like an administration fee that we're able to charge. All right, these next two slides, and again, I'm more than happy to dig in on a special conversation related to special revenue accounts. There was a presentation in the April Finance and Ops meeting. Sorry to keep referring back to that, but it's been a year of a lot of education. But there was a big presentation that I did related to the special revenue accounts in last month's Finance and Ops meeting. If folks would like that, I'd be more than happy to send it along. This is a snapshot of all of our special revenue accounts. Folks can see there are various accounts listed. The thing to remember about special revenue is this isn't inside our operational budget. This is additional funding that we have. All of these special revenue accounts are self-sustaining. What does that mean? The first one up on the screen, 2120 department, which is food service. Food service is a self-sustaining program. So if we do not bring in enough to go ahead and sustain the food service department per se, then we will have to go ahead and supplement that in our operational budget. The next slide is related to our expenses. Anytime we go ahead and build the special revenue budget, your revenue and your expenses always need to offset. So these are the expenses related to the special revenue accounts. Gotcha. Any questions on special revenue before I turn it back over to Dr. Andrade?
Good.
So we're going to go back to special education and talk about some of the changes and what the impact on some of the, that could be a relief on the budget kind of moving forward. So I just want to give me a couple seconds to just give a little background of some of the work that already taken place this year. So decisions weren't made in a vacuum. Over the course of this past year, our interim special ed director, Tom Beer, has worked with our building principals, case managers, special education teachers at the elementary level to look at the quality of our special education program. So this has been an ongoing work group for the last year. And one of the concerns that emerged was the lack of clarity in our special education programs. Whether it was around timelines, requirements, or notifications. The other concern was there was a lack of clarity on how students were placed into intensive needs programs. And we're only talking about intensive needs programs. It's not a student with a reading or a math disability. We're talking about students who are intensive needs or mild moderate that need more intensive services. And so through the work group, we saw a lot of mismatches in some of how our rosters and classrooms were being placed. So we looked to address those concerns. And we also looked at a trend that students who were being referred to intensive needs were actually having more behavioral problems, and they were accessing more ABA, applied behavioral analysis services that were needed in the classrooms. So we saw that. The other thing that came out that emerged was the program at Sunset Heights was actually being really successful. And there was a growing need on how do we continue that program. And what we saw in that classroom, there was a high level of support from BCBAs or behavior technicians, resulting in increased learning and engagement. And so we really went back to the group and how do we move forward. And so there's been conversations about neighborhood schools, and this goes to why do we have 43 special education buses? And so what you see on this slide, across the top is the neighborhood schools, Amherst Street, Bicentennial through Sunset Heights. And then down the bottom, you can see these are the schools across the left-hand side is the schools that we actually have our intensive needs services in. And you'll see that not every elementary school has intensive needs classrooms or moderate classrooms. And so that students are already traveling. So we'll pick on, and what's highlighted is at Amherst Street, there's only 5 students who live in the Amherst Street neighborhood who actually attend Amherst Street programs. The other 13 students who are identified for intensive needs programs are bused across the district. And so you can see at Bicentennial, there's 5 students. At Birch Hill, there's only 1 student in their neighborhood school. At Charlotte Avenue, I can't read that far, that's 9. I can look down, thanks. At Dr. Chris, Fairgrounds, and Ledge Street, there are no special education intensive needs programs there. So the 30 students at Dr. Chris who are identified in intensive needs programs are all bused to a different school. They're not in their neighborhood school. Same thing with Fairgrounds and Ledge Street, as well as Mount Pleasant. So you can see across this chart that we are busing a lot of students around the district and that they're not in their neighborhood schools, or there's not intensive needs programs in every single school. So this has been the model in Nashua for many years. I see a hand over here.
Yeah, but I want to wait.
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting you, but when you're talking about this, can you explain if Amherst Street has an intensive needs special class, why all 18 students aren't there?
Because,
when you're talking.
Yep, and so and there's different levels of support, right? So we have 3 levels or 4 levels of intensive needs classrooms. So we have some students in our most intensive needs classrooms that may have less than an hour of inclusion a day.
Okay.
And then we have moderate classrooms that might have anywhere from 1 hour to 3 hours of inclusion. And then we have intensive services that might have anywhere from 3 to 6 hours.
Perfect.
And then we also have Signs of Learning classroom, which is at New Searles. So if a student needs services in our signs of learning, whether it's hearing impaired, they're at New Searles, or we have our Project Achievement classrooms currently at Broad Street and Birch Hill, and those are for students that may need more services related to trauma or behavior. So we have these programs across the schools in different places. What we ended up finding out, and we did a study, and good segue here, is that through this process, students were being placed into available seats. So this is a current roster in one of our in a classroom. And so you can see some of our dilemma. We have, this is a grade 1 and grade 2 classroom. And you see in the right-hand corner the hours in general education. So we have a student who has access to a group para, but he or she, that student, is in general ed classrooms 5.5 hours a day. In the same classroom with a student who has only 1 hour of inclusion with a group para. How is a para educator in 2 places at the same time? They can't be in a regular ed classroom and in the intensive needs classroom, right? So we actually have to hire another para educator for that classroom so that the student can actually, one of those students can access their services, whether in the general ed classroom or in the intensive needs classroom. So what we're looking at in our reconfiguration is to balance out our classrooms so that students with like abilities and similar inclusion hours are grouped together so that they can actually receive the services in the least restrictive environment. So this is the reconfiguration that's going on. So whether it's a classroom moving to Broad Street currently already has classrooms that are intensive needs services, and inclusion is happening there. So if we add another classroom at Broad Street, a student with 1 hour of inclusion services will still have 1 hour of inclusion time. There will be no change to this service grid. There's no segregation going on. There's no warehousing going on. Students will still receive their services in a general education setting that they currently have now. What we're looking at is really balancing off these classrooms, because it's a burden. It's hard on a special education teacher or a para when they have such a range of abilities in one class. Who's coming, who's going at what hour, what is in that IEP, because a student that has 5.5 hours of inclusion is a lot different than the student who has 1 hour of inclusion. Could be 2 different curriculums, that is a lot to manage, and it's hard to recruit teachers to come in and say, manage this. So this is where the conversations, and we'll get deeper into the kind of reconfiguration. This is another sample. Again, this is our intensive needs. This is another classroom. Again, this is grade 2 through 4 in one classroom. We have fourth graders who have 5 hours of inclusion in the same class with second graders that have only 30 minutes of inclusion or 1 hour of inclusion. As a classroom teacher, how do you manage that? That is really difficult. So what we're looking to do in our new model is to reset, to actually define what services are in our intensive needs classrooms, in our moderate classrooms, in our instructional services classrooms, in our project achievement, so that we can maximize our resources so that students can be in the least restrictive environment. So then that student, we'll pick on this classroom here, if that third grader is in a group para, or the third graders are all in group paras, if there's an incident that happens in a regular ed classroom, all those students are coming back because we don't have enough adults. So students are actually not receiving the inclusion they have because of the staffing in these classrooms. So we're trying to reset that aspect so that we do have the proper staffing and students are in the least restrictive environment. They're in their general ed setting as much as it's currently called for. And so this is maybe not the reconfiguration, it's the wrong word, but it's a reset and really defining what is our special ed programs, what makes them special, and the students that are in the right classrooms. Because this is, again, This is difficult. This has been a practice that when I came here in 2022, I walked into a class action grievance from the union around special education because this practice was happening, and it was stressing people out. It is hard to work in these environments, and I think it's hard to recruit people in. So this is the reset. We are not looking to segregate students. We are looking actually to make sure students are properly placed and that they receive the services that are currently called in their IEPs in the least restrictive environment. And so this is an example of what would happen in a classroom next year. And this is a current roster minus the student names. So you can see in this setting, in this classroom, most of the students who are assigned to this intensive needs classroom will be in a general ed setting most of the day. And they'll come back to receive their services probably like anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so this is the direction that we're looking in our reconfiguration, which will alleviate some of the stress on our teachers, that we're able to recruit teachers to come in and we won't need contracted services. We'll be able to retain our paraeducators and clarify their roles and responsibilities. And again, if we can schedule better, if we can schedule better in this classroom, we don't need as many people. So we won't have to rely on contracted services. So this is where we're looking for some of those efficiencies. But I can't reiterate enough that the services in the students' current IEPs are not changing. It might be the location and where they're receiving the services. It might not be at Amherst Street. Some of the Amherst Street students, and I'll just pick on Amherst Street right now. Amherst Street is a Title I school, and a paraeducator needs a different certification to work in a Title I school. We currently have budgeted for 25 paraeducators, or 25, 28, thereabouts. Say, we'll call it 25. We have 18 contractors in Amherst Street because we cannot find paraeducators with the special certification to work in a Title I school. So, and that's been over the last 4 years. We're moving those classrooms out of Amherst Street to Maine Dunstable and Bicentennial, don't quote me, but they're going to 2 other schools that do not have a problem hiring paraeducators. So students will have more access to, again, general ed classrooms, but we also know that we'll be able to recruit paraeducators to those schools and not rely as much on contractors, if that makes sense. So this is the conversations that we're having about reconfiguration. We will be addressing this again on Monday night in much more detail, but this is the conversations that's going on. And it's not, thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for asking the questions about special ed costs, but we want to make sure that it's not a special ed and general ed conversation. I don't think you intended it that way. So it's not an us against them. Like, we need to educate all students properly, but there is a cost associated with this. And what the reconfiguration is doing is to reset some of these rosters and make sure that the students get what they need in the least restrictive environment without.
Alderman Cleen?
Thank you. I just want to go back to the fact that a para in a Title I school needs more certification or different types of certification. Mm-hmm. That being the case, I assume that's because the student population within that group has different needs. Now, if you just pull that student out and put them into a non-Title I school,
It's related to federal Title I regulations. So
right,
any
which is based on economic and so on.
Yeah.
But not different types of needs?
No, so, I mean, if you look at the Amherst Street, in the Amherst Street program, there's 29 students from Amherst Street. Only 5 are from the Amherst Street, right? So you have 2 students, we have different students from different schools that may or may not qualify for Title I.
Right.
So, but it's really about the regulations about Title I schools and who can work in there. Okay. So.
Yeah, in order to hire, to Dr. Andre's point, in order to hire a paraeducator, I think it's actually an associate's degree that the paraeducator has to have. And that again is required by the federal grant. So because they're Title I schools, in order for us to qualify for that federal grant funds, we have to make sure that there's an additional criteria to those positions.
But it doesn't change the level of intensity. I heard you say that the IEP will remain exactly the same, but it doesn't do a end run against the Title I, because you're taking a Title I student who would normally qualify in a Title I school. I know I'm saying this wrong, but I think you understand what I'm saying, is Title I schools are defined as that for certain criteria. Now, if we pull the student that's out of it, and I can see by this thing here where you're talking about how there's only 5 students in Amherst that are actually Title I, maybe some of the other schools that are, but when we're looking at some of those schools, they're not Title I schools. And they're going there and needing this criteria, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So the IEPs, at the end of the day, will drive the amount of services, but we want to make sure that we can properly staff those classrooms, and I think by shifting some of the classrooms, we won't incur the contract service expense to it, and still meet the students' needs.
Just one quick question, if I may.
Quick, because we got others who want.
Yeah, no, and I apologize for this, but does it increase the transportation cost?
We haven't analyzed that yet.
Okay.
So we will be looking at, because the rosters are still fluid and we
Okay.
haven't run it, but
Okay.
I don't think it could get much worse.
Yeah, a lot of them are being transported anyways, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
All right, thank you. So thank you for that explanation. I know that there's been lots of different stories being told, and I think what you just described is a thoughtful working group that's been working together to come up with a plan. I'm going to assume that the paras and teachers were also part of your working group. Can you just talk a little bit about the makeup of that group?
Yeah, so that's exactly, there was teachers, principals, I think there was a separate working group for paraeducators, but Mr. Beer has met with, he had 5 or 6 different meetings over the course of the year to make sure that, especially our case managers' voice were heard. And there's been frustration in this department for years on how students are placed.
Okay. And then if I could follow up.
Follow up?
Obviously, it's not going to be an overnight change in morale and ability to bring in new teachers or new paraeducators. Do you have a general sense of, like, if we implement this next year, we think it's a couple of years before we can kind of reset? What do you think?
No, so we've met, Dr. Scott Patty and the elementary principals have met with all the paraeducators or teachers who will be impacted in these moves. And, some students and some educators, we just had our opening, so teachers are selecting voluntary transfers or involuntary transfers. So some teachers have elected to move, some have stayed within the building. So it's been a pretty seamless process. Some people or paraeducators want to stay in their home school, right? And so we'll look at that. The other important factor is that out of these 228 students or thereabouts, we will be meeting with every family to describe the change. It will be through an IEP process. So it's like families have already received a letter saying that changes will be happening, and that will be followed up with an individual meeting with that family and talk about those changes.
Okay, and I have one follow-up.
Follow up?
So you were talking about the Title I requirements, and I believe you said that whatever school we were talking about, there were 18 that you had to pay out of contracted services. So my question is, at that point, does the funding of the contracted services outweigh the federal dollars that you get?
Yep. Yeah, it absolutely does. So the 18 paraeducators, for that example, in Amherst Street, that's coming directly out of our operational budget. That does not include the cost that we're spending in other areas with the Title I grant.
So this reconfiguration will address that?
Correct.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
And I think just 2 points to highlight. I think to Dr. Andre's point, right, this reconfiguration of the intensive needs classrooms, again, We're not saying we're shifting all of these classrooms to one specific school. We're not picking one specific school to just have as an intensive needs school. And again, going back, thank you, to this slide, there's only about 15% of those students that are currently identified as intensive needs students that are sitting today in their home school. So by us going ahead and making this change, it's actually going to benefit these students more, as well as make the teachers and the paras have a little bit of an easier workload coming in each day.
So all of these, the attending schools will remain the same next year. Amherst Street, we're moving 2 out of the 3 classrooms. There will be 1 classroom that remains. And those are mostly our medically fragile students who've been there for a number of years. It's fully staffed by NTU paraeducators. They've been loyal to that building for years and years, and we owe them a debt of gratitude of how they service us. And so we're leaving that classroom at Amherst Street, but there will be intensive needs programs at Amherst Street, Bicentennial, Birch, Broad Street, Charlotte, Main Dunstable, New Searle, Sunset next year. And again, making sure that there's full inclusion or inclusionary opportunities for all students in all buildings.
I have another question, but I'll ask it at the end. Thank you.
All right. So, a couple more slides here. So the Board of Education, as well as the superintendent's recommendation, is a 6% increase for fiscal year 2027's budget. Next slide, please. The breakdown of this would be as shared on screen. Again, this is a 6% prior to benefits in the benefit increase. So how do we, next slide, please. How do we go ahead and get to a 6% increase, and what do we have to do to get from that 8.8% increase now down to the 6%? It's roughly $3.8 million in total cuts. 2.4 million of those dollars we're identifying to come from positions. We're recommending to go ahead and cut $450,000 from transportation, and go ahead and reduce contract services by $1 million in order to hit a 6% increase if it is approved.
So if I just may here, the 21 teachers, this is why I brought up the high school schedule, in the reconfiguration of eliminating some high school teachers, but still offering the full program of studies. I don't have the exact number right now, but out of those 21 teachers that we gave a reduction in force letter to, or thereabouts, and Mr. Hoffman probably has the right number in front of me, but it's close to 10 or 12 teachers. It's not 21 teachers that are out without a job. Some of the retirements or some of the openings, teachers have transferred in, so it's really a reduction of hard conversations with really 10 to 12 teachers who truly do not have a job for next year. So it's not the 21. And I think, again, kudos to our HR department, our administrators, working collaboratively with Mr. Hoffman. It's helped to soften the blow.
So the mayor cut you an additional
Yep.
0.5%,
Yep.
which is
So-
600,000?
Yeah, every 0.5% is roughly $675,000.
Can you dictate where that's coming from?
We, as a district, will go ahead and step back if that is the proposal that is suggested and voted on. It will come primarily from positions, and then we'll have to do some additional cuts in order to get to that 5.5%.
Just wanted to get that out there for the record. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. That was going to be my first question. I have a couple questions. So if that does come back, like you said, that would be potential staff at that point. So I assume we will have to look for that money, or that will be what ends up happening. I want to thank you again for clearing that up. I mean, some of the things they said about you online, it made me good for a couple of days online, so, it took some of the heat off me.
Yeah,
But, so my questions, so Fast forward a month, we're at the school, the mayor's getting the heat, you guys are in the audience, and people come up to the microphone. Two questions for you that you're going to hear, and I want to see how you answer them right now. And I'll give you them both at the same time, so I don't have to beg Alderman Dowd for a follow-up. Why don't you just close the school? That's one. Two, and I'm not saying this is me, I'm saying this is what we're going to hear, and so let's try to get it out in the open now. The other thing is, the mayor told you 3%. You went 5.5%. Go 3, why don't you just go 3%? Now, if you go 3%, what ends up happening? What do you cut if you had to hold to that 3%? And how much damage does that do to the school program in Nashua?
Rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors, who's going?
Yeah.
I'll start, I guess, and then Dr. Andrade can hop in if that's okay. I think I won rock, paper, scissors. So rough estimate to close the school is about $1.6, $1.8 million. Why? I mean, 3%. 3% is going to be tough, realistically. If we truly have to do 3%, you're talking positions. You saw our budget, right? 75, 80% of our budget is people, personnel, staff. Got 12 elementary schools to support, 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, and a preschool program. 3% would be extremely tough. You're going to see a lot of layoffs and a lot of cuts. You're also going to go ahead and see cuts from some of our various offerings that Nashua is so wonderful at, which is CTE, you know, some of our athletics, some of our sporting events. If we truly get cut down to 3%, it's going to shake a lot of trees.
Yeah, that's going nuclear. Another $3 million cut is all of our programs. I'll go back to the first question. And I really want to thank the Board of Aldermen. We're in the middle of a facilities master plan study. So I think we reached out to the city to have Harriman come in and support, have a special BOA meeting to actually get the BOA's input on kind of next steps. And we'll be having a community forum on May 20th, and we'll have another meeting with the Board of Aldermen, Board of Education on our next steps. So could we close the school? Possibly. But I think the bigger question is what's going to come out of the facility study? And how do we come together as one Nashua to say what direction do we want to go? So we can start doing a Band-Aid approach to say, let's close one school here, one school there, but that is really not a plan. That's reactionary. So we really want to look at how do we take a proactive approach that the community can get behind? Because whether it's closing one school or 2 schools, I mean, we've had conversations possibly about Mount Pleasant in the past.
Yeah, look at the room.
Right?
Yep.
We've seen the community spark up when there's a possibility about closing new Searles. Right? And so we have the NIMBY, not in my backyard. So let's not close, but what is going to be the investment in our buildings over the next 25 years? And I'm hoping that's what comes out of the facility study. But over the course of, like, what did we look like in 5 years? So I think if we can support this 6% increase, so the mayor's 5.5, we're also, I think, in position to look at our facility study. We invested $400,000 into that, review it, look at those recommendations, but we may have time starting in September to say, this is our plan if we're closing a school, to adequately plan for that based on the data that everyone agrees upon. You know, not like as Ms. Johnson said, like we've done studies in the past, but we need to be unified on it and really start painting that picture. So it's not a punt, but I think it's strategic planning. So I think if we had a 3%, we're closing one school, right? And then that's just chaos. And it's hundreds of positions that we're laying off. But I think really, and that's how I would answer that question is, let's look at the facility study. We made that investment. Because on the contrary is, you spent $400,000, and you did whatever you did anyways without actually looking at the data. So why did you spend the $400,000? Like, that's not a savings. So that's where I think really we need to look at that study and make a purposeful, proactive approach that the community can get behind. And that's when we start closing schools and we see what's coming down the pike in 5 or 10 years. And again, that $3 million is, we're just going to be bare bones and all the extra services that makes Nashua so special. those are going to be the first ones to go.
Great,
So,
thank you.
So when the mayor came out with that 3%, I asked him, how would we possibly meet that 3% when all the cities and towns in New Hampshire are being hit with the same pressures? After all their cuts, Concord's around 13% increase. I think Merrimack's around 9%. And it's between 6 and 13 across the state, because the state keeps flowing monies down to be picked up by your local communities. And they're not funding adequate education like the courts told them, and they're trying nine ways around it. I mean, what do they expect? It's all coming down to property taxes. And unless there's changes in Concord, that's the way it's gonna be. Well, Kelly, I think I saw first, Clea?
Thank you. I wanted to just comment on the facilities study. I had the pleasure of attending one of the interactive discussions. I know Alderman Dowd was there, and there were a lot of us from these boards. But I thought that they did an incredible job of really talking to a lot of different people, coming up with different scenarios. But they also talked about, like, what do we want as a community and what does that look like? And I thought that was very powerful. So I think if anyone can come to the next one, you said it was May 20th?
May 20th at Nashua South in the cafeteria.
It was so interesting to see how they've kind of
6
moved
o'clock.
along. 6 o'clock, there you go.
More sessions, please, for those of us who can't make that one specific session. More sessions.
I do think that we sit here and we talk about numbers and we talk about, facilities, but there were some powerful stories from people who said, I'm a teacher at a different school, and when my kids walk in, this is what their building looks like. And I had a little guilt because my kid goes to Maine Decimal. It's beautiful. It just got renovated. So, thinking about it not just in dollars and cents, but what do we want for our community? How do we attract families and other people to come in, because this is a value that we have. So I really appreciated that. And I'm going to end with an actual question. I asked this then, and I just want to make sure that I put this out there again, because one of the biggest costs that we see is that out-of-district placement. And there was some talk about trying to find some facilities when we built McCarthy, but I just want to make sure it's front and center as we're looking at potential facility changes. Are there ways that we can bring that cost down by renovating buildings and being able to accommodate more kids in our out-of-district, or in our district, instead of sending them out of district?
Yes, I think the simple answer. I mean, and I think part of that goes into some of the reshaping what our services are, right? And how do we adequately staff, right? Because we know it's more than one great teacher with paraeducators to actually support our neediest students. So making sure there's access to school psychologists, BCBAs, OT, PT, social workers. So it's really a robust program. But in the facility study, we talked about making sure that there's adequate space for our intensive needs classrooms and in that aspect, because we would hope to bring students back K through 12.
Great, thank you.
Alderman Johnson?
Thank you. I'm going to ask questions from a member of the audience, but he's not here anymore. He had asked me to please ask the questions for him. Let me, give me 1 second, I took pictures of it. He wanted to know, there are about 269 open positions on the school website. I noticed that also. Are these included in the budget? And what's the total cost for the salaries, benefits, FICA, pensions for these?
So the current positions that are posted are a mix of fiscal year 27 positions that have already been identified, like your special education teaching positions, your paraeducators, et cetera. We still do have some positions posted for current school year. And then you also have actually several positions sitting up there related to the crossing guards. We have about 16, I think, positions that are unfilled from a crossing guard standpoint. In total, the dollar amount, I believe I shared with a Board of Education member that had a similar question. And I can forward this email along to the Board of Aldermen as well, so everybody has the data. I think it's roughly about $6 million that you'll see. Now, the tricky piece is the benefits, right? We could make some hypothetical prediction of what these open positions potentially would elect for benefits. If you want to do that, we could talk about roughly a 30% delta of what that benefit cost is going to be. Those positions, again, currently for fiscal year 27, once this school year ends, we should be taking down all prior year positions and only leaving up current year positions.
May I continue with some of
Follow
these
up.
questions? Thank you, because I also know that there was a Century 21 grant back from, I think, 2021 or 20, and I had questioned that with an email to Dr. Andre. He gave me answers to a lot of questions that I had. Okay, the next one, stipends, actuals have exceeded the plan for the last couple of years. Why is that, and has it not been corrected for the 2027 budget?
So you're going to see an increase in stipends for various reasons. We've had some turnover in positions over the last couple of years. When we do not have a position filled, you sometimes see a current staff member receiving a stipend in order to go ahead and fill in that position. So for example, we do have two interim special ed interim director and an assistant director right now. We have a couple people out on medical leave, so there are various reasons why stipends come into play. The stipend category, though, as well, isn't just those unfilled positions. There's various reasons that people get stipends, whether it's through the teacher's contract, and they're getting a stipend designated for a specific reason. So the stipend category is kind of like a catch-all bucket of any stipends through the district.
May I continue with his questions? Thank you. Salary adjustments have been planned for several $1 million the last couple of years, but actuals have been zero. Why is that, and why is there still budget for salary adjustments for 2027?
Yep, good question. So when we think about salary adjustments, you need to look at wages, or my suggestion would be that you look at the 51s, which is what I refer to as a two-digit roll-up, kind of in like a totality bucket. So if we were to look at current year's budget, and if you were to look at 331 actuals, I believe our total, sorry, let me just pull it up. Our total wages, you'll see that line item still being zero. That's usually where we put kind of a placeholder for any contracts that we are currently in negotiations for. So fiscal year 26, if folks recall, we did go ahead and negotiate our teacher's contract. For fiscal year 27, we will go ahead and negotiate, which we've already done a majority of it, negotiate our clerical union and our NASP, or our principals union. You're never going to see a transfer from that line into wages. So again, that totality bucket of the 51s, which is all of your wages. So if I look at the proposed budget that's in front of you, or hopefully in front of you, there's some actuals in there as of 3/31. So 51 wages, salaries and wages in total. The budget was 102 million. 102.5 to be exact. As of 3/31, we spent about $66 million. And again, you're not going to ever see that salary adjustment line move out of the 51900 of salary adjustments and move into the 51100, which is your wages full-time. It's basically a roll-up of the 51s.
May I continue?
Continue.
Thank you. One of the FY27 objectives on page 216 is improving efficiency. Can you describe a couple of these efficiencies and what the cost savings are in the 2027 budget?
Yeah, sure. So some of the efficiencies that we had talked about, again, is contract services. One could argue, is it really an efficiency or not? We really need to hire these folks on our own, right? The contract service amount is just costing us an astronomical amount of money. As Dr. Andrade mentioned earlier, we roughly budget for the paraeducators about $30,000. They're costing us anywhere between $45,000 and $100,000 through a contract agency. We really need to be driving down the cost related to contract services. But again, it's kind of a catch-22. We need these staff in front of our students, whether it's a special education teacher or paraeducator, if it's mandated in an IEP.
Furthermore, I think we have to remember we're not making widgets, right? We're educating students. So sometimes when we talk about efficiencies, what do we mean, right? And so sometimes it's how do you make the assembly line faster? That's not our job, right? And so sometimes it's really the efficiencies that we're looking at. The big one is at the high school. We're offering the same program of studies with a different schedule with less teachers. That is a major efficiency. That's, down 22 teachers at the high school. That's an efficiency. And I hate to say an efficiency is people, right? Because that's somebody's job, that's somebody's name efficient. And at the end of the day, it's about educating students. So, some of the efficiencies might be, around electricity or how we get better there. That's what sometimes we're looking at. But our efficiencies is delivery of services. And so whether it's our special education program of how do we staff better, how do we have a high school schedule, that making sure that it's the right amount of teachers. So those are the major efficiencies that we're looking at. Do we have the right amount of adults in front of students? So I just want to be careful when we say efficiencies and we're not cutting off our nose to spite our face. I know that there was a couple questions that went up really fast.
May I continue?
Continue.
Thank you. Last year, the board gave you $3 million. Has that all been spent through at this point, or?
So that money you're referring to of $3 million was remaining benefit money that was left over from prior year. That got transferred into the trust fund related to special education. In order to go ahead and offset those contract service costs that you saw this year, which is going to be about $7.9 million, we absolutely had to go ahead and almost exhaust that trust fund.
Yep.
In addition, at some point, depending on where we end this year, we might be coming back to this horseshoe to have a conversation of, is it possible to go ahead and do some type of additional supplemental appropriation out of our special revenue account?
Thank you.
Alderman Kelly?
So my question was around that. The way you get to the 6% is reducing contracted services by $1 million. But you're also sitting here telling me that we came in at $7 million. So is that even a realistic? The math doesn't math.
Yep, it's a great question. I think internally, we as the district need to do a better job of recruiting talent. We need to try to do what I would call some passive sourcing of truly reaching out there to try to find some of the talent on our own versus, unfortunately, this year, I think it was a very quick play to go directly to contracted services.
So you'll be doing that pretty actively this year? and
Yes,
really
we
trying
will.
to look at how you can do that. Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. During the meeting last week, not my question, but Ms. Raymond asked it, and I thought it was a very astute question. In regards to the contract services versus our own folks, she had made the suggestion, do we try to raise the level of pay of our own folks that's a little bit more competitive to try to woo those people onto our payroll, thus saving us money? Because I would assume that maybe those contract services are for-profit organizations. So, there's some margin built in there for them to make a nice profit while we don't. So I thought that was a great question. Have you looked at it? Are you planning to?
We started having internal conversations, but it would be a conversation that we would need with the NTU to open up contracts.
Okay.
Alderman Lopez?
Can I just give you a direct invitation to set up a table at the Tree Shrews Block Party? Because when you're trying to recruit people, like, that's a population that really is looking for work, has a lot of diverse skills. And I think that's an example of things that you could do to engage the population of Nashua, to get some of the paraprofessionals that you're looking for. There's a lot of younger people that are coming through those areas. And I don't just, I'm thinking of the Tree Shrews Block Party because I'm organizing it. And it's also on June 13th, by the way, just so I actually give you some actual information about it. But there's other events that are coming up which engage the community, the Nashua-specific community. And I think there's a lot of people that are, like, just don't have an easy path to it. And if they meet somebody, they shake hands with them, and they're given a description, they might be much more likely to apply and give it a shot.
If I may respond, so that's where we use ESS as a recruiter and subbing. So Nicole, our representative from ESS, she's everywhere in Nashua. She's at the library, she's at the grocery store, she's putting up flyers. So she's actively recruiting, so we'll give her that reference as well. But she'll set up a table in someone's living room if that'll help. So, and that's what we're looking for, and that's what we use the contract servicing in that company to do.
And that's the same as hiring directly through the district so that we're not using outside contractors?
Yep. So we just have to do a better job at it, so.
I think the other, oops.
Good.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think the other thing we need to do from a recruiting strategy standpoint, and we've talked about this, unfortunately, it's a catch-22, right? Because it's a cost item, but our employees really should be our number one recruiting source. Referrals, like, we all know people, right? If it's an organization that you're excited to come to work at every single day, we should be talking about doing some type of referral incentive to go ahead and hire that staff. So there are definitely opportunities and ideas that we are looking at to really strengthen the recruiting efforts here at the district.
Yeah, and I think my purpose here wasn't just to recruit for the, yes, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think my purpose was to maybe set the precedent that the rest of the city could be helping recruit, raise awareness of this, because we did talk about it last year. And I think for maybe a couple of months, I was like, hey, you guys should check out the school district on the wrong end of the year, because we do our budget season at the beginning of the summer, not towards the end. So I think maybe we, as a city, could help raise awareness that there's these jobs that are available and people could be applying.
Alderman Kelly?
I don't deign to know HR or any, your salary, et cetera, but I know we did an incentive program with the police when they were having trouble recruiting, so maybe there's an opportunity to do one-time incentives to move people from contracted to full-time.
Again, I think if anybody looks at the union leader, there are a ton of school districts trying to get teachers all over the state. So it's very competitive. And some of the salaries I've seen, you've got to be competitive. So are there any other questions relative to the Board of Education's budget before we conclude? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. And Alderman Tebow, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to table R-26-028
By roll call.
by roll call.
Would you call the roll?
Yep. Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Yes, please.
Alderman at Large Alicia Gregg.
Yes.
Alderman Derek Tebow says yes. Alderman Paula Johnson.
Yes.
Alderman Tim Senate.
Yes.
And Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Yes.
And that's unanimous. Back on the table.
Motion carries and is tabled till the next budget meeting. General discussion.
Actually, there's a public comment on this thing before the general
Oh,
discussion.
before the general? Okay, I
Yep.
thought it was after.
Yep.
Anyone for public comment on name and address for the record?
Absolutely.
And you have 3 minutes.
Chesley Marvin, 10 Marion Lane. It's a little too late, so excuse how rough this is going to be, but I just want to urge everybody to fund our schools, and regardless of who shows up or doesn't show up at various meetings, we all have very busy lives, and I wouldn't assume that people don't care about school funding and the future of our children. So I'm here as a voice and respectfully disagree with the use of the term NIMBY to refer to people who give a fuck about our schools
Please watch your
and
language.
show up all the time to speak for people and for our children. So I also would love to see more public hearing or like public sessions that speak about the budget for the schools. And I'd also love to see another public session about the public info thing on the 20th. I won't be able to attend, obviously. I'd love to attend. Everyone knows where I stand, so I know that's not a problem, but I really do like to participate in things like this. And I care about all of our elementary schools, not just New Searles, but obviously since that's the school my kids attend, I don't think it's a crime to stand up and say I would love for it to continue to exist, and budget ties directly into that. So anyway, thanks everybody for your awesome questions, and I know everyone's trying to do the best for Nashua and our students, so I'm here doing the same. Thanks for your time.
There is a public hearing on the entire budget in June at Nashua High School North.
Right.
Any other public comment?
I'm going to second what Chesley said. Oh, sorry, Eric Losleff, 22 Marion Lane. I'm Chesley's neighbor. We're going to have a block party in August, apparently, so just FYI. But, and you're invited, obviously. But I wanted to second what Chesley said, and I apologize, I don't have anything really prepared right now, but I fully also disagree with the term, the label NIMBY with regard to closing any of the public schools in Nashua. Totally inappropriate. And I think the closure of any of the individual schools, and again, like Chesley, I'm very much connected to New Searles, and I've seen how it's had great positive impacts on my son who's in kindergarten and on us as a family. My wife and I moved here from Colorado with the Harris Road and Conant Road neighborhoods in mind, with New Searles in mind, and it's gone above and beyond all of our expectations, even having known like the good rating and good positive regard that we heard about from far. So I just wanted to kind of express my concern over those comments, express my concern that about any school closure in general, and there are profound and often personal impacts, and that's why I think using that label is dangerous. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but there needs to be really, really deep, thoughtful consideration about that proactive plan moving forward, and far more than what the Harriman facility study could unveil to any of us. So that community discussion is going to be really critical, I think, and hearing from the residents around Harris Road, around Conant Road, in Ward 9 is going to be really critical, and I hope that all ears can really consider those thoughts and opinions. That's all.
Any other public comment? Seeing none. General discussion. First, a couple things. We just finished a project on New Searles. We just paid the last invoice. We basically replaced the front of the school. We put in a security vestibule. We changed the entire power system. We put in a whole new fire alarm system. So that ought to be taken into consideration when you're looking at schools. Also, when you close a school, and that's only the Board of Education that can do that, there should be a use for that building, because now it becomes city property. And there are a lot of things to look at when you close a school. Another thing is, I think a lot of people have had some concern about the budget books this year. I don't want responses yet, but I want you to be thinking about changes for the next year, the 28 budget, because this year's, we're getting some input for the budget book, but not a whole new budget book. So think about what you'd like to see in the 28 budget book so we don't have any surprises. The other thing is, I want you to start thinking about the public hearing and how we want the public hearing to flow. And again, we'll bring that up later, but I just want people to get it in the back of their mind as to how we want to have the public hearing going. All right, other comments? Committee members first. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and thank you for pushing that back on the BOE. Just kidding. I think, no matter what school, if they ever close a school, happens is going to be, probably the people in that area are obviously could be, unless they really hated the school, which there's always a few, but, my kids went to Bicentennial, my wife went to Bicentennial, so, obviously, it's going to be its 50th anniversary this year, right, Bicentennial, so 76. So, it would be devastating to us, of course, if they decided to close Bicentennial. So it's going to be hard if that's the path they take at some point. But if enrollment keeps going down, there's got to be some changes somewhere. And, I don't think, I don't want to speak for Dr. Andrade, but when he says NIMBY, I don't think he means it in a negative term. It's just, we all are attached to our school systems. I know Alderman Cleve, for instance, would probably chain herself to Mount Pleasant to keep that from closing.
The door.
And we all, in all our wards, we're going to fight. And New Searles isn't that far from me. It's actually closer to me than Bicentennial is. So as far as distance, so I can get there much quicker. So, we played games there, basketball games, baseball games at New Searles. So obviously all these schools are precious to someone. And it's going to be a very difficult issue if we have to go down that road at some point. So it will be hopefully, like the people in the audience said, a very thoughtful discussion, and we have to trust that you guys are going to go through that with the help of the BOA to look at the facility study and the Harriman study and try to decide what to do in the future. It's a shame. Hopefully we could keep as many open as we can, but we got to get more people in here going to school here. And if we could do that, then maybe we could save everything. But thank you.
Okay, they got Alderman Cleve, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of reiterate a comment that you made, Mr. Chairman, and that is that when we close a school, we only shift the cost of that school to the city, unless we sell the school or we do something like this. I also think that the facilities plan would show something like New Searles, who's had upgrades and so on, as a physical school that you would want to keep, versus something like Mount Pleasant, who hasn't had a whole lot of dollars put into it since 1986. So I see the writing on the wall as far as Mount Pleasant is, but yes, I will be chaining myself to the door, as well as many of the other residents that live there. And I do hope that
support?
I do hope that we take into consideration with the facilities plans the types of families that go to that school. So you've heard me talk about Mount Pleasant having the walking school and the economic impact that having these students bused somewhere else versus now they can walk to the schools and they can, the families can actually go to different events. For instance, there's a lot of events that Mount Pleasant has, such as like the bingo night, and I know Ms. Lamphere has joined me at bingo night, and they have movie nights, and they have all these different other things. Even if all of those things went to another school, these parents who can't drive because they don't have nothing more than one car, or don't drive in general because of economic needs, they no longer can participate in these things. So I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration. I know Mount Pleasant has not had any money in, as I said, I see the writing on the wall. They didn't put a security vestibule in like they've been doing to all the other schools. They haven't done any of these other things and so on. So, it saddens me. It truly saddens me. But I want to tell you that I think your presentation that you gave here was really good, and I appreciate the extra discussion about the special education and showing us the visual of this and everything, so I do appreciate it. I don't want to sound like I'm chastising or anything. I'm just repeating things I've said before. So I thank you for coming, and I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thanks. I wanted to thank the Ward 9 residents that stuck it out for 2.5 hours to speak of little kids at home, so I appreciate that and empathize with that for sure. In terms of closing a school, there's some research out there, I can't quote it, but it says basically, and I had mentioned this to the parents at the PTO meeting that I got to sit in on, but there's research out there that shows the best school for your kid is the one that's closest to your house. And I think that we should consider that. And then what I heard tonight is by closing a school, it's 1.6 million in savings off the bottom line. Okay. Perhaps that redistricting, maybe you model out if we redistrict, what does that save on transportation costs? What does that do, big picture? So I guess I would just ask to look at all the options and use that last one, regardless of the school. as a last-ditch effort. And I understand the way the direction that the school population is going, but what I'm hoping for any member of the public that did tune in or will tune in or read the minutes is when you have a shifting population that requires more attention and more specialists, it's going to drive the cost up. And I think that, I was trying to find a clumsy metaphor, but basically if I wanted to completely redo my house, I could do it myself, which would be cheaper, or I could hire people, and that would be a lot more expensive. So it seems like that seems to be happening with some of our students in the district, and I think that maybe we can find a happy medium, get real creative, and try to curb these expenses that do fall upon the Nashua taxpayer. So I'm cognizant of all of it, and I thought it was a good open discussion tonight. Fantastic presentation. Really just clear graphics and just year over year, and that's, that speaks to me, and I really appreciate that. So really, really good job. Well done.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. One of the things when you're looking at closing a school, you can see the student population is going down. But we now have 5 different building activities going on in the city. One of them is going to be over 500 homes. So when you're looking at school populations, you need to take into account not only the increased families that'll be living in those facilities, and people say, well, they're not going to have any kids. Well, that's ridiculous. Some of them are 3 bedrooms, or 4 bedrooms. So there are going to be children in them. Where they come from, we don't know. And as the population is aging, there's also going to be younger families buying homes from older people moving into town, assuming they can afford them. And the other thing is the birth rate, that should be taken into account. But I don't have a problem with closing a school if it makes sense. And again, that's up to the Board of Ed. People keep coming after the Board of Aldermen, close a school. We can't close a school. Not our purview by law. So, all right. I think remarks by Alderman's probably been covered.
I just had a question.
Not going to do it on one of your posts? No, go ahead.
No. Well, I'll post it as soon as I find out the answer. But when is the public hearing? What time?
Well, I can tell you it's at 7 o'clock. I don't have the schedule right.
7th?
June 7th.
I believe
June 7th.
it's on 6/7 if you're wondering.
6, 7, and 7.
6, 7, and 7.
6-7.
Nashua High School North. Auditorium.
Thank you.
Televised.
Actually, it's the 8th.
Yeah.
It's the 8th.
It's Monday.
It's Monday, the
Because you
8th.
joked, Tom.
June 8th.
No, everyone's going to think it's the wrong day
6,
because I said
8
that.
at 7.
Yes, 6,
Nashua
8
High
at
North.
7, yep.
Okay.
It's
All right.
all in there.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort, but it's not getting there.
See, I'm glad we had that.
Alderman Senate, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. I make a motion to adjourn by roll call.
The motion is to adjourn by roll call. Would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman at Large Alicia Gregg.
Yes.
Alderman Derek Tebow says yes. Alderman Paula Johnson.
Yes.
Alderman Tim Senate.
Yes.
And Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Yes. We're adjourned at 9:42 PM. Thank you, everyone.
It really wasn't.